Hey everyone, Temporal here, and for this session we are going over tank pairings. We're going to be rating them all, top to bottom. Definitely let me know your thoughts, either in chat or in the comments down below. Either way, I'm interested in what you think. Interested in the great stories you've had, all that good stuff. But for now, we're going to go through these. I am zoomed out to start to sort of show you the entirety of my rankings because I wanted to be confusing. Just so you're clear, my rankings do go like this before going over here and going like this, like that. So it is a top to bottom next tier, top to bottom next tier, top to bottom next tier, top to bottom across. So we sort of get here and do a carriage return, depending on how you want to think about that. But these are sort of the meta played excellent compositions. These are what you'd want to have. Obviously, at top would be our most meta compositions. As we move on, we still see good combos. They're still strong, good combos. They're mostly, when I say good combos here, they're pulled out in specialist situations. Like Reinhardt plus Winston can be used in a brawl opening when you're expecting another brawl team, things like that. Arisa Diva isn't naturally good, but it makes a lot of sense if you're playing a bunker and you're expecting dive, that sort of thing. So there's sort of adjustments that get made. The Reinhardt Sigma, that's not a natural tank combo, but it's one that you see when you're expecting a brawl matchup and you're trying to lean into the poke. So maybe you've swapped out your Diva for a Sigma, your McCree for a Hanzo, that sort of thing, and you're trying to play it a little bit slower, less into the Maywall type win conditions, more into the we're going to grind them out type thing. Then we see some older tank combos, some weird stuff over here, still perfectly workable. Then we start to see, hey, these are still fine. You're not going to complain. These are workable tank combos mostly. And then you get into kind of garbage territory, with a little bit of exception there. But that's how we're going to be going through these. We have a super chat coming in from Adam to start things off for 199 saying, "Oh wow, that's a lot of science." I appreciate that super chat, Adam. And with that, let's get into it. So, we're going to start here, and our top tank combo or our top two tank combos are going to be the kind of more meta combos right now. This is all going to be fairly meta for this excellent category, and you could move these around based on how the meta is shifted. Obviously, any list like this is going to be dependent on how things are going. But this will work for organized and regular play. These comps right here will actually work in both organized and regular play, ladder play. So when you're looking at Ball Sigma versus Ball Diva, neither of these are really heavily protecting their ball. It's not like your Diva's going in all that often like, oh, I'm here to DM for my ball to protect them from the Sleep Dart, to protect them from Reaper, the same way a Diva might protect a Winston when those two would go in together. What you're actually more looking at in these combinations is they're more used in situations where, hey, you're trying to soften up a team enough, perhaps let's say with a Sigma, while your ball is doing some gentle roll throughs, maybe using tethers, hitting the team, maybe hitting the team, and then from behind using gunner form and shooting at them for a bit, softening them up enough before they can actually trigger the dive, and the team hits their good dive against a team. Ball these days is currently more being used in dive comps or poke dive comps. And if you have a Sigma, you're leaning more into the poke, you're doing a good job of softening a team up more in the poke phase before you hit that dive. If you're using a Diva, you're generally looking to go either, hey, we're more worried about vertical mobility, so that's something important. We're giving up some poke, but we're going to be stronger in the actual dive phase itself. So we don't have to soften up a team quite as much. We still have to establish angles, but we don't have to soften up a team quite as much before we hit the dive. So these comps perform very similarly. That's why I'm talking about them both at once. And those are sort of stylistic swaps that you make, slight adjustments to your comp that change it a little bit. Do you want a little bit stronger poke phase before you hit your dive? Or do you want to have a little bit more vertical mobility, but also be able to hit your dive strong? Obviously, strong aspects of this comp would be, hey, ball, super independent, in a lot of ways isn't tied to needing their off tank, good independent hero. And then anytime you have Diva or Sigma, you're doing a lot to suppress the opponent's win condition to make them really do a lot, wear down DM, get Sigma's hands off the board, wear down shields, whatever the case may be. Generally, a lot has to be done to wear down the defensive resources that these two have before they can just execute their win condition before they can. In a lot of cases that means throwing out an ult, but at other times it means, hey, we have good tools to help our backline rotate. You can't just, pick us off from a bunch of angles, that sort of thing. They can each answer an angle. So these are good heroes. Anytime you've got Sigma or Diva, that's generally going to help your comp in the off tank position. You're going to notice as we go through our tier list that there is a lot of Sigma and Diva. In fact, this excellent tier is entirely made up of Sigma and Diva in the off tank position. We could have called it the Sigma Diva tier. Okay. So next we'll move on to our next comp. Brawl, solid. Brawl is good. I still find the best off tank for Brawl is Diva. She gives you more flexibility. That's going to surprise some people. Some people, especially lower on ladder, would have been like, no, it's Zarya. You're supposed to play Ryan Zarya. That's the tank combo. It's Ryan Zarya. Sadly, it's not. Well, those two have excellent synergy for making Reinhardt better at brawling, for getting Zarya more energy. Well, that is fantastic. The raw flexibility that Diva gives you to clear angles, which is something that, again, Brawl would struggle with, especially if you gave it more Brawl heroes like Reaper, like Mei, things like that. What it really needs is the ability to solve off angles, to have a little bit of ability to protect their Reinhardt. Say the opponents throw out a Mei wall, something like that. Diva's ability to go up and over it, and then, oh, we got Mei walled up. My Reinhardt's right here. That's cool. I'm Diva. I boost her up to here, and now I can DM down over my Rein and protect him while the team breaks through the ice wall, rotates around the ice wall, that sort of thing. As well as the ability to take high ground, clear people off of it. That's really important. What Brawl becomes vulnerable to would be, hey, there's a soldier on an off angle, a McCree that rotated, something like that. When people take angles against a Brawl comp that's playing clumped, that's going to work well. Diva can answer a second direction or go chase someone. Reinhardt is obvious. He can swing his hammer. Some of you might be going, but Diva's so much worse at supporting Reinhardt swinging his hammer. It makes you so much worse at the actual brawling. And that's not actually true. You can use Diva's DM in a very similar way to how Zarya uses Zarya's bubble on Reinhardt to enable Reinhardt to swing. Now, it's not going to protect you from Zarya beam damage. It's not going to protect you from Mei freeze. It's not going to protect you from Reinhardt swings. But from most other things that you'd be worried about, it's going to protect your Reinhardt. It's going to massively reduce incoming damage while your Reinhardt is swinging. And it's a fair trade to go, hey, doesn't block these three sources, and these three sources, including sim beams, I suppose. So these four sources are really important things to not block, and the reason you see things like sims and Winstons come out, things like that. Don't get me wrong. But you can use one tick at a time. You can use a quarter of your DM. You can use half of your DM and not have fully committed to 8 to 10 seconds of not any longer being able to protect your Reinhardt or anyone else. So Diva, actually really good at enabling Reinhardt. Really good at enabling every tank, let's be honest, but this is the one that you would generally run. If your opponents are at a level where they're not playing off angles, they're not taking high ground, yes, you will get more raw power on ladder out of your Zarya, but like as your opponents start getting better, as you start getting the technical skill to drive Diva, being not the technical skill, the decision making to drive Diva, because she is more complicated decision-wise than Zarya, this does become the better combo. That said, Zarya, always a strong ladder hero, not always a strong ladder hero, can be a very strong ladder hero, of course, because, hey, the ability to fix people's mistakes with the bubble and get stronger off of it, well, teammates make a lot of mistakes in Overwatch. Okay, so now we're going to move on to our next combo here, which is, this is double shield. This is real double shield. Sometimes when people say double shield, they mean any composition with two shields, like Reinhardt Orissa, Reinhardt Sigma. No, this is real double shield right here. It's Arisa Sigma. The way this comp works is it forms two bunkers. And to draw that out here, it could be like one bunker here, and let's say the enemy team is here. Well, this is going to work pretty well. You're going to threaten from here. You're going to threaten from here. This team isn't going to like it. They're probably going to back off and change the angle. They're going to back off. If they back off, what happens? So instead of having this big of an angle, let's draw our angles here. Instead of having this big of an angle between the two teams, that's the measure of our angle, what we end up with if the teams back off, let's actually just go like that, is, so you're here and here, and now let's have red team back off all the way to here. Well, that does something really cool for red team. That makes the size of the angle, that's bigger than I want it, that makes the size of the angle much smaller. So red team is safer. A single Rein shield, a single DM, a single Mei wall, any of those things now block this out. Except because red team backed off like this, now blue team can march one of their units forward, another one of their unit, and then that creates the angle again, and then they can march the other one forward because the protection of this one shooting means that if red pushes into this unit gets to shoot at them. If red pushes into our further back unit, obviously they're having to walk past our further forward unit and get shot in the side. That's how this composition works. It's not the best thing in the world to stack these two together. I know we see situations, especially on ladder, where they get stacked together, but if in ladder or organized play, you can figure out how to use your other shield tank to take space. And this isn't strictly a Sigma job. Sigma will usually be your sort of more forward unit of the two, like, hey, hit them from the wing, hit them from the wing, hit them from the wing. But your Orissa also has to understand how to take space and how to do those things, because you sort of do some amount of leapfrogging. Sometimes it's a leapfrog up to where they are and then the Sigma unit moves again, but they should both understand how to do this. And if they can do this, you can protect your team really well. They try to run at your Orissa unit, they get hit in the side of the head by a rock. They try to run at your Sigma unit, they get forced back with a halt. They get pelted, just forced down with raw damage. And I'm going to draw again here. If you are looking at this and you are two bunkers and you're split like this, and let's say the opposing team is a dive team, and they go, well, you might be thinking we're supposed to stack. That makes us safer from dive. That's not really the case, because good dive teams are going to set themselves up with like 3 different angles around an opponent that they want to dive. So maybe let's go like, didn't mean to fully erase there. Maybe let's put our 2 bunkers like this. Let's have the dive team decide that they want to dive the forward bunker. Maybe they have something here. They have something here, and then they have something here. Well, this is a good dive. They've got a nice triangle that they're going... Oh, that's not quite right. We're trying again, guys. We're trying again. Drawing is hard. Draw 2 bunkers. Put something here, something up here, something up here. Cool. Powerful triangle, this bunker is going to get destroyed. It's going to be terrible for the Sigma plus, let's say, McCree that's chilling here. The Sigma plus McCree are absolutely going to get destroyed by this 6-person dive. Except that to set this dive up in this first place, we had to stage divers in this poke team's kill box. Hey, wait, you had to rest people for a moment, let them recover cooldowns. They had to rotate into this space and then hold it for a moment before you could trigger your dive, and this isn't a place that you can do that in. So that doesn't really work. And all of these people are going to struggle a bit with staging because, hey, they're going to get poked, they're going to get poked, they're going to get poked. Like, all of these are going to struggle a bit. They're going to struggle to rotate into their positions because places that have cover against one group aren't likely to have cover against the other group. To get that final piece to set up a good, proper dive, you're going to have to put yourself in a place where you're just getting shredded for both sides. This is how this works. Does dive still have an advantage over double shield? Absolutely, and dive is the correct rock, paper, scissors matchup to win, but poke is not helpless, and I just want to illustrate this and how this works so that everyone doesn't get into the mindset of, oh, I'm supposed to stack my entire bunker together if we're against dive. No, you don't really want to stack your entire bunker together as you're up against dive there. You have enough poke, and poke heroes peel for each other generally a bit better when they're separated. If you have a Sigma and a McCree in your forward unit here, your Orissa is going to peel for them just fine from over here. She doesn't need to be over here also getting pile drove, also getting zapped by the nano monkey that's zapping her team. Sure, the brig isn't going to peel as well for this group over here. They can still throw repair packs. The McCree here with his flashbang isn't going to pale as well for the other group if they get dove, but still has his shots to fire with, all those sorts of things. So when we're talking these like real poke heroes, and I'd point out Brig is not a poke hero technically, she's actually a brawl hero. She just gets used in poke as an anti-dive mechanism, a brawl hero, and McCree is a poke brawl hybrid. But like, the poke heroes peel for each other pretty well when they're separated. Okay. Let's move on here to the next one, and this is going to be the last one in our excellent tier, and this is Winston Diva. Winston Diva is the classic dive combo. You will see a lot of Winston Zarya. That's the next thing that we're going to cover used now, but Winston Diva is the classic dive combo. The place you see it used most right now is in 6-man, Talon Dive. Some people call it Monkey Rush. You've seen lots of different names for it. That is where it gets used, but this is, as a classic, still a good tank combo, even on ladder, even without the rest of your team synchronizing with it for a 6-man, and that your monkey can go in pretty hard and trust that they're going to get an extra level of protection from Reapers, from Annas that have sleep darts for them, from McCrees that have flashbangs for them. The things that make Monkey unhappy, that he only has one bubble to deal with, and then he's sort of leashed by that bubble, Diva does a really good job of solving for him, which lets him engage pretty hard. If Monkey's allowed to engage pretty hard, his engages can do more work than some of Ball's engages. But he needs to be enabled for that to work. And things like an Anna work great for that, but things like a Diva work great for that as well. The problem, however, is one of the single best monkey peelers in the game, and one of the most common peelers in the game right now is Brig. And Diva doesn't do a ton to protect Monkey from Brig. In fact, Brigs are legendary for their, a Monkey and Diva dive is coming in, I'm going to whip shot away the Monkey, and then as the Diva gets here, I'm going to bash her. So, you've sort of almost or partially shut down two aspects of the dive. Maybe there's 4 divers coming in and you shut down 2 of them, and you'll also turn and throw a repair pack at one of the people that they were trying to take out. That's an insane amount of value. So one of the ways that we've evolved to deal with this is we've said, no, we're going back to the early thought process. I don't think this is amazing, but it does have its place of we're going to put a bubble, a Zarya bubble, on the Monkey. So the Monkey's going to be able to zap people with the Zarya bubble. Brig can't whip shot the bubbled Monkey. Brig can't bash the bubbled Monkey. And then the Monkey will drop their own bubble right as or right after the Zarya bubble falls off. So instead of having no seconds of safety because they'd get Brig bashed and perhaps Brig bashed and then whip shotted out, or they'd get whip shotted out to never get it in the first place. They've got 2 seconds, 4 seconds, whatever it is between those 2 bubbles to get a bunch of cleave work done, not just on one person, but on 3 or 4 people. And that's a lot of ult charge. That's a lot of value that gets hit there. I do still rate the Winston Diva comp as stronger because I find it more flexible and better. It leaves your backline a lot better protected. It also leaves you with a Diva on the board, which again does a lot to slow down the opponent setting up their win condition, more so than a Zarya does. Zarya's like, oh, hey, maybe you don't want to use Blizzard because I still have Zarya bubbles that'll cure frost particles off of people. Diva's like, you don't want to use Blizzard because I'll eat it. You also don't want to use Dragon Strike. You also don't want to use Pulse Bomb. You also don't want to you have so much more that she's locking out, making difficult. It's like, you don't really care if, we don't want to high noon yet because Zarya's bubbles. Nonsense. You don't care if there's Zarya bubbles up, but you also, even if you did care, would still care about the Diva there. So that is going to get into it. Yes, double bubble is a comp. It's a legit comp. Could it have made the excellent category? I suppose. Ultimately, I am putting it behind the Winston Diva. I would not be surprised if people flipped that in their own charts, though. No one likes double bubble nano monkey primal. That is true. That is true. So then we move on to this, and here we start to get into comps that are fine, and I'm calling them great, but comps that are fine, but they have really mostly evolved because they're evolving for specific matchups. They're evolving because they're expected. These will be more common in organized play than ladder by and large, and that would be, hey, you're running Reinhardt plus Sigma. Reinhardt Sigma, in some senses, is, 2 shields, it's powerful. We can throw our Sigma shield out there, and our Reinhardt can swing through it. We can have a Sigma shield in front of our Reinhardt as he shatters, so he can't get shattered. Cool, nice stuff. We can have our Sigma stick his hand through Reinhardt to protect Reinhardt. Cool, but that's not actually how you play Sigma. Sigma likes to play at off angles where doing all those things is harder. So that's not great synergy. But when you get into actual poke v poke, as we've talked about, or excuse me, brawl v brawl, as we talked about Diva and how taking that off angle was strong. They needed the flexibility in brawl comps of having that Diva who can go set up on off angles, who can go clear a soldier off the high ground, who can go not let a McCree on their flank go do work, who can hop over a Mei wall and still protect her Reinhardt with DM. We talked about all those things. Well, Sigma doesn't do those quite as well as Diva, but Sigma does poke harder than Diva. And poking hard from an off angle is still pretty darn powerful. So as it's very clear it's going to be brawl v brawl mirrors for a while in the game, it became a situation where, well, if it's going to be brawl v brawl, as long as we think we can stop you from just overwhelming us and running us over, which isn't that hard to do because generally the team that sort of makes a unearned aggressive move gets punished. That is sort of a way that you saw that in goats. If teams made earned aggressive moves, they absolutely rolled the other team. But if they made unearned aggressive moves and the other team knew how to defend against it, defending against it was generally a little easier than making the aggressive move, than properly setting up the aggression. And you've seen similar things in Brawl v Brawl. Because that's the case, Sigma can go, hey, we're going to have a poke advantage over the team that has the Diva or over the team that has the Zarya, and that's going to cause us to go, we can potentially win a long fight like that. So not as versatile, really they're mostly to win Brawl v Brawl matchups, but by no means a bad comp. You wouldn't complain about having this comp on ladder. I would consider this comp better in organized play than on ladder, this specific tank pairing, but I am going to put them here, and I don't think most people would feel terribly bad about having this comp on ladder. You do still get some protection from your Sigma as the Reinhardt in the sense of the other team is softened up as they're coming at you. The Sigma does have some neat tricks to help you out, to peel for you, to enable your aggression, to pressure them in a similar way to double shield, where Sigma pressures on a wing to allow you to push forward while taking less pressure on your shield. So still a valid and powerful comp. No, Ryan is never powerful. Don't play Ryan. Ryan's okay. I mean, you'll see Ryan has shown up twice so far on our list. So Ryan's okay. Okay, next we move on to Arisa Diva, and this is very much the same thing. It's come out as a specialization. Arisa Sigma is better. If you're playing Arisa Sigma, you have more poke power. It is more powerful. But Diva gives you that flexibility if you know you're against dive and you want to go, hey, we know we're against dive, but we're going to stay on our double shield comp, and we're just not going to make it not double shield by having a Diva. Diva helps you clear that high ground, which the divers like to use to stage. Divers really like high ground to stage. Diva has that flexibility to go get on top of things, do some things like that. Diva is much more powerful in a brawl than Sigma is, so when the divers actually force their brawl, because that's what a dive is basically going, hey, we're going to force the brawl stage quickly with a faster rotation than a brawl team could. You can't soften us up as much. A poke team counts on winning the brawl phase by softening up a team enough that by the time they get to them, even though they're bad at brawl, they can win. A brawl team counts on winning a brawl phase by going, we're going to take a bunch of damage in the poke phase, we're going to lose resources in the poke phase, but we're still going to be strong enough to get there when we win. A dive team looks to win by going, hey, we're going to shortcut through the rotation phase with our mobility to take less poke damage. You know, they obviously properly, they do still rotate, they do still set up their dive correctly, but they're able to rotate two places where they're not taking as much damage as they would walking at the opponents, and then they use their abilities to dive from there, and they force a brawl. And they have a powerful brawl because it hits from multiple angles, not as powerful as a brawl team's brawl might be, but hey, they skipped the poke phase. And obviously, they lean into their poke aspects if they're against a brawl comp. But that's how those all work. So your Diva gives you harder brawl in exchange for weaker poke, but you're going to want that against a team that is going to be trying hard to shortcut the poke phase, the rotation phase, with a dive that then lets them brawl you harder. Well, now your Diva is still more powerful in the brawl. She can cast that DM over much of her team to protect them. She has that short range weapon that does a lot of damage in short range. She can boop people out. She's stronger in the brawl than Sigma, who is very, very frail in the brawl. Unlike Arisa, who has Fortify and becomes a decent brawler, Sigma is not very good in the brawl. I just want to be careful in what I'm saying here. Dive teams do still rotate to set up their dives correctly. Dive teams can't, even though I'm saying they shortcut the rotation phase, they do actually still rotate to set it up. Don't go thinking you can just all dive from choke at the enemy team and it'll be okay. It won't. But because you're rotating to different places, you tend to take less damage when you actually hit the final part of your rotation. Okay. Now we move on to a classic, and some of you may be in pain to see this here, but this is Reinhardt Zarya. This probably moves up lower on ladder, would move up the tier list a little bit, because until teams start using off angles well, until teams start using high ground well, this is really powerful. But I gotta say, as a tank line, if you don't have any way to control high ground, you can't put good poke pressure up there other than Zarya right clicks. You'd have to rotate up to go do it yourself. You don't have mobility to get up there. You don't have poke damage to influence up there other than Zarya right clicks. you're going to have a rough time. So once teams start taking reasonable advantage of high ground, this comp gets a lot weaker. And once teams understand how to poke you in rotation, it gets weaker too. But this is obviously very, very powerful. It is the most powerful of the comps for the actual brawling. Um, this comp might object to that, but I'm going to still say it anyways. So this is the one. This is great for brawling itself, but the reality is it's so one-dimensional in what it can do that it suffers heavily in organized play. It suffers heavily in higher level ladder play. It suffers heavily when there's meaningful high ground on the map. And King's Row does have some high ground, guys. For those who don't believe that, go check out my Kings Row map guide. I do map guides on this channel, and you guys can see I do talk about how Dive can play, and I do give video examples of Dive executing reasonably well on Kings Row. But that's okay. So then we move on to this one, and this is our first double main tank combination. We're running Reinhardt plus Winston. And Reinhardt plus Winston is mostly, like I said, used in Brawl v Brawl type situations, and it's mostly used as an opener. It works well as an opener in Koth, for example, where you're going to get to the fight at the same time. You expect the opponents to be on Brawl, and because it's the first fight, you know that the opponents don't have ults. So not having your Diva or Sigma to make setting up win conditions through ults harder isn't as big a deal, but Winston can actually, A, zap teams through defense matrix. Defense matrix doesn't slow him down. He doesn't like fighting Diva one-on-one situation, but if the Diva can't hurt him, he can hurt a team that Diva's trying to protect, which is nice. And guess what? Reinhardt shield can protect him quite well. So this is a good one for that. And what you end up seeing is Reinhardt can protect Winston, and Winston can zap, and that's cool. But really, the bigger thing here is what we can have happen is Winston can drop his shield, and Reinhardt can still swing. And Reinhardt still being able to swing while being shielded by Winston's shield is a big deal. Reinhardt, as a hero, has to pick between swing his hammer or shield himself. Anyone who can cover that problem for him, is a good partner for Reinhardt. Well, Winston can cover that problem for him by going, hey, Reinhardt, you can swing once or twice, then I'll drop my bubble so you can continue to swing, and I'll also be zapping you while you do this. And then the final big awesome thing about this is these guys both do damage through shield. So if the other Reinhardt gets defensive, tries to protect themselves, maybe it's a Arisa shield, maybe it's a Reinhardt shield, maybe it's their own Winston bubble, a Sigma shield, whatever. These guys do damage through shield, so they can't stabilize. They can't put up that Reinhardt shield and go, no, we'll protect ourselves. These guys will still finish you off with the tail end of their aggression, and cleaving aggression, I might point out. This is a lot of damage against a Brawl team that is tightly stacked. You also see this come out in Brawl because obviously Diva can't defend against Symmetra, whereas Winston, Sim can ramp up off of Diva's shield, off of Winston's shield, but Winston can actually eliminate the Symmetra, even jump past and go fight the Symmetra while their front lines are meeting, that sort of thing. So this is a valid tank comp. Don't get me wrong, this is fine, but this is really fine for early in a match, and it's fine when you're expecting to be playing Brawl v Brawl. I would not roll out on this in really other situations much at all. It's going to be much worse, and it would drop heavily on this tier list outside of that situation. But it does have a very good situational use. Gibraltar is your favorite run map, Levy? Isn't that something? Isn't that something? Okay. So now we move on to comps that we've put in the cool category. And for these are comps that you'd basically look at and go, hey, we have this tank combo, no complaints. And these are probably a little more general usage than what was in the great category. The great category was pretty heavy with compositions that are good, but situationally good. Like, these comps are good, situationally good. Outside their situation, you would pretty heavily de-rank them. These other two are fine. They're less situational. Actually, this one is pretty situational too. It's a situation that is very present for bronze, silver, gold, I would say. And then maybe King's Row. These guys are a little more general. This is the Arisa Roadhog. And originally, we didn't have Sigma in the game. We didn't originally have Arisa in the game either, but after Arisa came out, until Sigma came out, Arisa's sort of presumed partner, the belief was that the tank pairings were Winston Diva, Ryan Zarya, and then, well, I guess based on what we have left, it's got to be Arisa Hog. And sometimes that got called pulled pork, and it's fine. The reason that it works is because these are both poke tanks. We go, hey, these are both tanks that do have pretty strong poke phases. Hog's right clicks can one-shot people. Hog can find picks in the poke phase with his hook. Orissa has strong poke, consistent poke with uptime through the fusion driver with, that's just high damage. Halts work well, and then obviously you have the specific combo of you halt people out from behind a shield, and then Hog hits an easy hook on them, and they pair for an elimination. And that is still a great tank synergy to use and abuse. Obviously Divas, Sigmas, Reinhardts, everyone learns how to deal with that in terms of eat the halts, make sure you get pulled by the halt and then flash your own shield, that sort of thing. Like, those are things tanks learn how to deal with them, but that's still a perfectly valid combo. You can carry with it. It's ultimately not as powerful as the Sigma combo, and that is because Arisa Sigma work a little bit better together, both because Orissa can maintain the space a little bit better, which we like. We like to wear down the team and then take space. Whereas Hog, if Hog goes and tries to play the off angle work, Hog goes and takes off angles, and after he's done his thing, he kind of wants to back out a little bit, and that doesn't really work with wait, but Orissa would like to be able to push forward type thing. Orissa's group would like to push forward, so Hog is sort of like up and down in his power scale. Sigma's more constant in his power scale. Orissa's more constant in her power scale. That consistency works well for them. Yes, you don't get the combo. The halt rock is not as powerful as the halt hook, but the reality is we also, like what we can do with double bunker, and we like that Sigma, not as strongly as Diva, but Sigma still does delay the opponent's ability to just win the team fight with, hey, you have hands available. That means that if a team is trying to brawl on top of you, if you keep your Sigma near their Mei, they're going to have a tough time dropping that Blizzard. Or, hey, you guys may have good solutions with your High Noon, but we can throw a shield in the High Noon's face. That sort of thing. Like, these things that slow down the opponent solving the fight. Well, you could say the slowing down of the opponent solving the fight would be a team doesn't want to do something until Hog's hook has been forced out, but Hog doesn't want to have to hold onto his hook. Sigma really doesn't lose much by holding onto hands and has a very short cooldown on redeploying shield after it's been deployed. So that's what we're looking at there. The superior wet blanket effect, not letting the opponents win, not letting them have fun, is better, as well as the consistent pressure level in our double shield compared to this. That said, if you guys have a lot of practice on Orisa Hog, no one is going to be terribly upset seeing an Orisa Hog combination. It is a powerful combination, has good poke, they're both strong poke heroes, and that halt hook is a game winner. You can march to the end of a map, just basically never stopping, abusing halt hook, halt hook, halt hook through a lot of the ladder. Okay, there we go. Let's move on to Winston Ball. Winston Ball is another specialist pick, so this would be sort of like the previous tier where we saw a lot of specialist picks. And this is, you're looking to dive, you're looking to hard dive. I gotta be honest, I find this strictly worse than any of the things we've listed before. I would much rather, if we're wanting to run double diver, run Ball plus Diva or Winston plus Diva. I would rather run either of those combinations. Winston plus Ball can hit pretty hard with its dive. We've talked about Winston's dive as a pretty hard hit. Ball can do that pile drive. That's like the most powerful, the fastest dive. They can both get in a little bit faster than Diva can. They hit pretty darn hard. But again, you've got no ability to deny the opponents from doing what they want. You don't have that defense matrix. You don't have that experimental barrier. You don't have that kinetic grasp. Like, it's got a lot less ability to deny the opponents from doing what they want. Sure, it's got a Winston bubble. Sure, Ball can knock people around and mess them up a little bit. But it really can't afford for like any sort of poke phase. It can't do what these two comps up here can do, which is let's have a little bit of a poke phase, let's wear you out a bit, and then let's hit our dive. All it can do is hard dives. hard dive. If you're running these two together, you basically have to hit hard dives. Whereas if you're running ball with either of these two off tanks, the Sigma or the Diva can soften them up and then dive. If you're running Winston Zarya, you can hit a bunch of soft dives with your Winston where you get the Zarya bubble that makes your Zarya more powerful, gets your Winston energy. That's really not an option when you're running these two together. So it's like we have one trick, we can hit one hard dive. I would much prefer the more flexible options. I would also prefer having that defensive thing that just makes it harder for the opponents to go, okay, we've figured out our solution. We're now ready to win this fight. And it's unfortunate because you will see this get swapped to on ladder a lot. Like someone will pick ball and the other tank picks Winston thinking, yeah, let's dive. And it's like, no, if you have a ball, get yourself a Sigma or a Diva. Now, obviously, if you can't play Sigma or Diva, sure, makes sense. This would be our next highest pairing in terms of tier with ball would be Winston, but you'll notice there's quite a gap between our 1 and 2 spot and getting over here to our 12 spot. Okay, next we're going to move on to Ball Hog. Ball Hog is fine. Ball Hog isn't like amazing or anything. Ball Hog works on a similar principle to, I mean, it's sort of a mix between Arisa Hog and Ball plus Sigma. It's sort of a mix of that, but it's just mostly worse at what it does. So what I mean by that, we're having a little bit of internet, but hopefully that's going to stabilize. What I mean by that is the Roadhog is going to be in a situation where, hey, they can fish for some hooks. They can fish for hooks after pile drive. They can fish for hooks because ball hits someone and just knocks them into the open. And that's cool. That could open up some easy hooks. Not quite as easy as Halt. And also he doesn't have, that strong firing platform, that strong distraction the same way Arisa is. Arisa can force eyeballs on her. Ball can, of course, force eyeballs on himself with the roll through, that sort of thing. And then Hog can hit the hook. But that's what we're looking at in terms of the win conditions are a little bit different. The Arisa Hog both want to soften up the other team. The Ball Hog less so. Again, that makes it a little bit more like a Ball Sigma type comp, but again, what you really want is you're wanting that power with the Ball Sigma to go, we soften you up, then we hit a dive. The Hog, again, with those power spikes is awkward, where either the Hog gets a pick with that hook, maybe you hit a roll through to knock someone out from behind a shield, and then the Hog hits a pick, or a pile drive, and then the Hog gets a pick off of it. But then you've sort of got to wait on that cooldown cycle before you can actually go in, because your comp isn't strong enough after you've spent that pile drive and that hook, and that's a lot of respawn time, and by the time you engage, whoops, and then we're still on our no Sigma, no Diva problem. Then we move on to our next comp, and we see in that next comp that we're looking at Ball plus Zarya. It's okay. Ball plus Zarya is okay. The thought here is we're going to make our ball engage even stronger, but the truth is Winston gets more out of having his engage made stronger by a Zarya bubble than your ball does. And the other thing that you look at is your ball doesn't need that Zarya bubble. The thought was, we have to give Ball this bubble so that he doesn't just get slept. Balls have gotten better and better at figuring out how to survive, how to use their adaptive shield. Adaptive shield now doesn't have that silly situation where sometimes it just doesn't deploy because not by some great skill, but just bad luck mostly. Like, yes, you were always trying to stand a ball right away, and sometimes right away happened to catch that fraction of a second where adaptive shield got canceled. That's now gone. That makes this comp a bit worse, as does the bubble on Winston. Simply enables him more than the bubble on Hammond does. Like, that is going to be a reality. Hammond doesn't need to stay in as long. Once Hammond is deployed his abilities, he's not as powerful. Once Winston is deployed his abilities, he can still be getting good cleave. So being able to stay in longer doesn't help as much. Obviously, you can play it in a somewhat similar way. Get some energy for your Zarya, but the problem is they don't have as big a need to shoot at the ball because they know the ball is mostly leaving. Yes, the ball should stand and do some damage if they're being ignored with their weapons, but ultimately it's easier to ignore a ball for a moment after it's deployed its abilities. That means your Zarya isn't as guaranteed energy as they are with a Winston. Finally, we move on to the last one in our third tier here, and this one may be somewhat controversial. We are looking at Reinhardt plus Arisa, and this this is another double shield. It's not the double shield, but hey, there's 2 shields. And some of you may be surprised to see another double main tank comp this high. This one ends up here because Reinhardt being able to swing through an Arisa shield really is quite nice. And Reinhardt seeing the other team softened up as he's walking up there is really quite nice. And being able to halt people off high ground, less true now with smaller halt, but is still a thing. So not completely helpless against high ground. And finally, Arisa's pretty good in a brawl for short time periods. So these two actually do work together pretty okay, especially if your Arisa gets some practice on accurately deploying the shield at distance so that your Reinhardt can swing through it, can use it. Anything that really lets Reinhardt swing while still having some level of protection is very good for Reinhardt. And then again, decently strong brawl from Orissa when she's got Fortify going. Reinhardt gets some help in his rotations. This one works out okay. Obviously not as good as having a Diva or a Sigma in that slot for the usual reason of there's always going to be a knock on a comp for not having a Diva or a Sigma. Okay. So now we move on to the comps that are mostly in the territory of you're going to get them on ladder. That's fine. You wouldn't really see these comps in organized play. They're mostly just inferior versions of previous comps, but you're probably not really going to complain about them on ladder either. Reinhardt Hog. Okay, that happens. Hog doesn't really protect Reinhardt. Hog sort of protects Reinhardt in the sense of, oh, if the other Reinhardt fire strikes, maybe they'll get hooked. Oh, if the other Reinhardt charges, maybe they'll get hooked, that sort of thing. Oh, Hog puts decent shield pressure on the other Reinhardt. Who cares about shield pressure? Like, we look at this and it's mostly just worse than your other options. You would prefer a Zarya bubble. You would prefer a Diva contesting it from another angle. You would prefer the hard enable of swinging that you get from having a Winston bubble or an Orissa shield that you can swing through. It's mostly just worse. You might go, oh, but, you know, it could be like the Reinhardt Sigma comp, and your Sigma is threatening an off angle, and now your Roadhog threatens that off angle, and then because your Roadhog's threatening that off angle, the Reinhardt can work forward. Except that explosive nature of the Roadhog doesn't work as well for that, because you sort of wouldn't really want your Reinhardt advancing until they start paying attention to your Hog, but then like your Hog is going to be trying to leave as your Reinhardt is going in, and then they're not really fighting at the same time. So it's okay. It's not great. Winston Sigma, it exists, but let's be honest, it's a strictly worse version of what we've listed as our top tank pairing here, which would be Ball Sigma here. You can play it if, for example, you're at a point on the ladder where the tank players, or you're just with a tank player that doesn't know how to play ball. That's fine. Your budget version of that, this is a perfectly valid budget version of that comp if your team, or if your main tank player here doesn't know how to play ball. Perfectly fine. You're going to soften up a team as best you can, and then your Winston is going to be in there for the actual brawl phase. Great, that works. Not as good as it would have with a ball there. Next up, we have our ball plus Orissa. It's okay. I mean, this is, again, a situation where you're kind of looking at this and it's much the same as the previous one. That may seem weird. I just talked about Winston Sigma. How on earth could I say Ball Orissa is much the same thing? It really is. You're softening up that comp with a Orissa that's doing the best she can to apply pressure like a Sigma would be. She's got a shield, she's got her fusion driver, and then she's going to walk in and fight harder than a Sigma would because she has Fortify. Except that she's slow to walk herself in because she has to pick, unlike Sigma, who can effectively kite in, kite out because he doesn't have a movement speed penalty while shooting. Orissa has a meaningful movement speed penalty while shooting, and that makes her going, I'm going to soften you up, I'm going to soften you up, I'm going to soften you up. Now I'm going to stop and battle cattle jog my way into the fight once my ball has actually hit the go button. That really isn't as good. You've got a little bit more ability to chain boot people, knock people away, halt people, then knock them away to really isolate people like that. But mostly this is just going to be, again, a worse version of a strictly better comp using Ball plus Sigma. This is just a freelancing team. We look at this here. We could look at this and say, again, same thing. Hey, the Winston will go in sort of like a budget ball. The Hog can soften them up like a budget Sigma in this type of situation. Yeah, it works. sort of how it works. Really, when you're playing these two, they're mostly just going, yeah, whatever, I'm not going to work with my other tank, you're not going to work with me, and the Winston is going to try and corral people, find openings to either get picks or threaten picks, which turns the team around. The Hog is also going to be independently going, hey, let me try to get picks, threaten picks, that sort of thing. They're both sort of going, let's just find different lanes to play in, and hopefully that's going to work out. Winston Orissa, strictly worse version of this, strictly worse version of Ball Sigma. So nothing too wild there. It suffers all of the same issues that the Arisa did in the other one. It suffers the same issues of Winston not really having the good poke phase. Winston does go in for the brawl, but then doesn't get any real protection during the dive. Doesn't really like that. Okay. Now we get into the comps that are just they're starting to feel bad. If you get anything above this on ladder, you should mostly be feeling pretty okay. Couple exceptions to that might be you probably don't want Ryan Winston late in a match. You might be okay with it for the first fight or two. You probably don't want that late in the match. Everything else here looks pretty okay in terms of if it's what your team is running. No big deal. We're happy. So, Hog Zarya. This was a meta. Hog is the main tank in this meta. This was a ladder meta. There's been some famous tweets about this from certain former professional players. Yeah, obviously the way this one works is your Hog goes fishing. Your Hog knows that they're going to attract a ton of attention when they go fishing. They get a Zarya bubble. Your Zarya somewhat reliably gets energy off of that. Your Hog gets a little protection while they go fishing. They should have slightly different angles. Maybe they're playing around each side of the King's Row statue. Whatever you're looking at there, okay, that sort of works. That's a comp. It's double off tank. I believe it's the first double off tank comp that we've listed here. Yep, it is. We've listed some double main tank stuff. This is the first time we've listed a double off tank, and we're going to call it the best of the double off tanks because, hey, it's got something resembling an engagement strategy. If you get that pick, you're then strong. You then have a high energy Zarya. You're then up one. You can battle reasonably. Yeah, that exists is basically what we're going to say. Next, we move on to, but I should go into it a little more than this. And the reason I'm going to go into it a little more than this is double off tank. If you're stuck on ladder in a double off tank situation because you're both off tank players, you don't have a main tank player, and neither of you have a main tank in your kit. You want to play 4 angles. Your Zarya needs to play in a way that she can see your Hog when your Hog is engaging, but is still herself striking from a different angle than the other team. So if we did a King's Row example, let's say this is the statue, and you have something like this where, hey, maybe your Hog is playing over here, your Zarya is potentially going to play over here, and is sort of going to go, hey, I want to be able to get the bubble on my Hog when they go in, as they try to hook, that sort of thing, and then I want to finish my rotation over to here and start doing damage, that sort of thing. And that's a little complicated to make work, but it is better than standing behind your Hog and trying to zap through him. You could also sort of accept that the reality is you're not getting too much done until your Hog actually gets a hook done. But that's whatever. That's fine. That's how this works. Basically, all of these double off tank comps are going to work in such a way where you need to treat them both as pokers from different angles that are hard to advance into. Makes it hard for like a Rhine Shield to walk into, makes it hard for a diver to set up around either one without getting punished by the other, that sort of thing. Treat them sort of like you're playing double shield, except use cover better. Okay. So from there, we move on to Arisa Zarya. This, I believe, is going to be our worst main tank off tank combination. Yeah, it is. They don't work together very well. Bubble doesn't really help Arisa. Like, Bubble helps Arisa a little bit in the brawl phase, but Zarya wants to be able to get energy more reliably than that. And yes, you can bubble your Arisa while she's firing between shields, that sort of thing. You guys can get synergized and get some, but it's a little hard to count on her reliably taking damage in those situations. And then, okay, you've strengthened her brawl phase, and you sort of have to be on the right page of when she starts brawling, you bubble her if you have it. She needs to withhold her fortify. You don't want to bubble her while she's fortified. It gets messy. They're really not that great. Zarya wants a closer range fight. She has some range, but she really does want a closer range fight. She needs more reliable damage than that. And Zarya in general isn't good into poke type situations. She doesn't pair amazingly with poke tanks either. She pairs better with Roadhog than Orissa because Roadhog's poke is such a spike in terms of its threat time, and she does function better around things that have that spike of engagement power. We've seen our two heroes that have sort of spikes like that, or most have spikes like that, that we've gone over here are going to be the Roadhog and the Zarya. Next, we move on to Sigma Hog. This gets here, and this is one of the better double off tank combinations because they're both such strong poke heroes. And because, like we said, you play double off tank like you're playing double poke tank, like you're playing a double shield that uses cover harder, where you're split, you're poking from different angles. Well, this is a very high damage combination from those two off tanks. It's going to do well. Next, we go ahead and move on to Reinhardt plus Ball. Ball can do some okay things to help out Reinhardt. Ball can challenge a team while Reinhardt's trying to rotate. Ball can knock a team that is less brawly towards a Reinhardt for Reinhardt to swing at. But that's kind of the end of what he can do. That's not as helpful as having a Zarya bubble, Winston bubble, other things. It's not really what Ball wants of soften them up and then we'll dive them. So Ball plays it, in a situation if I'm going to try to bring some people to you, it's not great. It's not great. It's not as strong as like juggling someone with a Winston over to your team to get brawled. So it's okay. Yeah. Now we start getting into the really painful ones. We could have even put this one in the next tier, the please no tier, but we were doing tiers of 5. So here it is. And that is going to be Hog Diva. They exist. They exist. Diva can clear high ground. Hog can try to hook things. Really, why this ends up here is because it can do something similar where you can protect your Hog while it's trying to hook something with your DM, and that's something. It's like a worse version. You don't get a benefit out of doing it like your Zarya does, but it exists, and it's a way to make the Hog engage your main tank in this situation a little bit stronger. That said, I would really rather have a Hog Zarya or a Hog Sigma than a Hog Diva, because I'd rather just play towards that poke off-angling win condition than try to play so heavily around, we've got to land this hook, let's put everything into this hook. It's too telegraphed, it's too easy to beat. Next, we move on to some really bad ones. We've got Sigma Diva here. They've really got nothing going for them. Like, the only thing they have going for them is, hey, Diva can challenge off-angled high ground while Sigma sort of tries to push main. But if I'm really trying to push main, I'd much rather do it with a Reinhardt, an Orissa. Those are going to be better things for pushing main. If my Sigma has to push main, it better be because I'm working with a Ball, someone like that who's going to go in, a Winston, someone like that who's going to go in harder than Diva is going to go in. These guys play like a more flexible, in terms of height, double shield comp. That's what they do, but other heroes can't keep up with Diva to work with her the way a Hanzo, a McCree, a Soldier would keep up with your Sigma in an Arisa Sigma comp. And obviously Sigma can't keep her spaces. She's good at taking spaces. We sort of can put them on a paradigm. We can put them on a scale when it comes to our off-angle type stuff, where Hog is really good at taking off angles. Hog is really explosive and dangerous from off angles, so we can have Hog up there. Well, we can go Hog explosively. Hog does a lot of damage from his off angles. He's very threatening. Sigma is very hard to remove from his off angles, and Diva then has the characteristics of she takes off angles the most, but she can't stay there forever. She can't do the most damage. She can sometimes stay there by backing off if it's high ground, protecting herself up there, but she is ultimately easier to remove if actively being tried to remove than a Sigma. She doesn't do as much work from those angles as a Sigma. She definitely doesn't do as much work from those angles as a Hog. Again, you can count it as doing significant amount of works if she surprisingly eats a grab or something like that, but in terms of constant pressure, not quite so much. So that's sort of what we're looking at. This is just a budget, not very good version, and it doesn't have that double off tank win condition of let's poke them hard enough, let's just be like that. Like, she's really not doing very amazing poke. Diva is not that powerful in the poke phase. Her contribution to the poke phase is she can get out of it quickly, she's got micro missiles, which are sort of okay poke on a cooldown, and she can take spots away from other people, which is great. Taking spots away from other people who are more powerful in the poke phase is fantastic, but it's not enough poke herself to really help significantly win that phase, which is what double off tank comps need to do. That said, we get even less happy with Sigma Zarya. Now, we don't even have that high ground control. We don't have particularly good double poke power. The Zarya doesn't have a good energy source. The Zarya goes, hey, I bubble Sigma, but Sigma has hand, Sigma has shield, Sigma likes to use cover, Sigma, has the shield on a short cooldown. Sigma does not want to be in a brawl at all. So like, oh yay, I've made Sigma live in the brawl for an additional 2 seconds. Sigma just gets crushed in the brawl. So like, no. We really don't want that. It's not a terribly powerful combination. They are very different in the win conditions that they want, and Zarya has a hard time getting useful bubbles out of Sigma and is looking around praying that she is a Reaper or a Doomfist or even a Mei or a Genji to give bubbles to. Something. Yes. And then finally, very similar problem here. Diva plus Zarya, you can drive this okay and move it up a little bit on this tier list, but not like 5 spots or anything. But if your Diva's really disciplined and you guys are really on the same page for we're going to bubble the Diva as she's like excuse me, sorry about that. And she's like nose diving through the team, hitting boops, things like that. You can do it, but mostly this is garbage. When Diva starts taking damage, she's gonna DM. That's what she's going to do. Zarya also wants to bubble her. Doesn't work terribly well. You also don't have a terribly strong poke phase. If you go for that double off angle poking, Zarya's got some range, Zarya's got some ability to do right clicks, but no energy to make them powerful. Diva doesn't really have that range. This is bad. Really anything where Zarya has to work with someone who's too inclined to protect themselves, Arisa, Sigma, Diva wants to play at any degree of range, she's not going to have a good time. So that's what I've listed. I know I didn't really go over chat, so I'm still going to get into chat. So thank you guys for bearing with me there. I will read through the interesting bits of chat, but I want to know what your thoughts are, what you agreed with, disagreed with. If you have questions over how these are played, you can throw those up there now, and let's continue through this. Magdalena says, overall, you should think of Orissa as a high ground artillery that between halts, fusion driver, and fortify duels in a similar way that an off tank might, as opposed to establishing a frontline position. Funny. That's from your Overwatch's Orissa guide there, and I've reviewed that on this channel if you guys want to check that out. I don't disagree that an Orissa plays off angles. I don't disagree that an Arisa can play high ground, but Arisa is not an off tank. She's not. And I've had that discussion with Realth, and Realth would like to categorize all poke tanks as off tanks, but that's a different video, and you guys can go check that one out as well on this channel. You did, Parker. You popped in right at the end, but if you have questions over anything that you see on your screen, I can zoom in, I can zoom out, make more of these visible. Definitely let me know, and I can go over them. Ball and Hog is viable when both of your tanks are just DPS players playing for passes. Hey, Nuntype, how you doing? I mean, that's a thing, definitely. Ball and Hog is one of your, like, if you have 2 DPS players playing for passes, Ball and Hog is sort of like the best thing you could get out of them. You're much happier than if they're playing Hog Zarya, for example, or even worse, Diva Zarya, or Sigma Zarya. Like, you can get stuck with Sigma Zarya, and that can suck when you get that combination as your DPS players playing for passes. Ball Hog, if they know how to play those 2 heroes, work pretty well even if they're freelancing. If they're synergizing, it can get even better. You do hit pile drive hooks, knock away from core hooks, same way you do with a halt hook, but that's a reasonably good comp for ladder. Zarya can bubble Genji when he's deflecting. It sucks when that happens. Yeah, yeah. That's why Genji is not a great bubble target, but, is better than the Diva. Okay. Sigma would be fun if you could hit anything with his abilities. Just takes a little practice. Literally just takes a little practice. Oh, Levy says, I read some old Chinese military books back in the day, and one of the tips was always build two fronts so the enemy can't surround without exposing themselves. There you go. There you go. We're talking about double shield there, or really any poke comp wants to build two bunkers there. That single bunker is really outdated as a playstyle. You do not want all of your people in one area there. Okay. Back in the day, Jane said Reinhardt Diva was a throw and he was pretty popular. Maybe that was something to do with it. I mean, Reinhardt Diva is amazing. Reinhardt Diva is amazing. It's not as powerful for your Reinhardt as Reinhardt Zarya is, but it's still amazing because you need the flexibility that Diva brings. You love that you don't always have to clear high ground yourself as Reinhardt when you have a Diva. You love that a Reinhardt can break off on that off-angling, late-peeking McCree or Soldier to go deal with that, or can go chase out that pharmacy while you're rotating, or while you're fighting even, can keep the pharmacy out of the fight. Like, you absolutely love that. And again, DM is not as good for protecting your Reinhardt as Bubble is, but can hop over a Mei wall to do it. Can do it in increments instead of all at once. Pretty great stuff there. You're not seeing a lot of Roadhog in this upper row. Yeah, you'll notice there was very little Roadhog in our top 15 tank pairs here. There were exactly two spots, and one of them is the one I think everyone would have predicted, which was the Arisa Roadhog ended up in our 11 spot here. The other one was Hog Ball, which isn't terrible. Okay. At least on ladder, self-sustaining tanks seem to be okay because it allows you to play the support duo of Brig Zen or Mercy Zen more. I mean, you can play Brig Zen with both of these. I don't know that I'd consider Zen terribly or Diva terribly self-sustaining. That said, there's a reason this comp came into existence and was used a lot more heavily before the Sigma nerf, and we really didn't start moving heavily over to mixing in the Diva version until it became necessary, because when you could run the permanent self-sustained Sigma, that was preferable. Now that we've seen and been able to use this, and I'm talking like a year ago for that, now that we've been able to see and use this version of the comp, it does have a place. It does give you a very powerful brawl when you actually make the dive happen, and it obviously gives you verticality as well. It's called pulled pork, not a rasag. Yeah, we called it pulled pork earlier. What should I do if I constantly get the please no category as a tank? I can play all three tank characters in please no, by the way. Okay, if you can play all three of the characters in the please no category. If you can play all of these, I mean, the real solution is you develop yourself one. I would say play Sigma. If you get stuck, like you're constantly stuck in this category, play Sigma is probably your answer. Obviously, that forces you towards the top of the category, which is good. You could obviously add Hog to your repertoire as an off-tank player, and that would be like, oh, look, if I have Hog, I can automatically force myself one spot higher, that sort of thing. Every Hog combo is better than these worst combos here. And there's a reason for that. Hog is not a terribly good tank. He's the worst tank in the game, but we do see that just having a Hog is better than some of these anti-synergy comps, and it's littered throughout better, that sort of thing. So you could go, oh, just learn Hog. You could also learn a single main tank to give yourself some ladder protection, which isn't a bad idea. Most players, be they main support players, flex support players, main tank players, off tank players, most of them can play at least one thing reasonably in the off role. A lot of main tanks have a pretty passable diva because they know that they're not always going to be able to get on their main tank. A lot of flex support players might not have a particularly good Lucio, but they can bring out a perfectly solid Brig, for example. And same thing with main support players. They're going to go, hey, they can play their Lucio, Brig, Mercy, but they're probably going to have a BAP in there that they can use as well. So it's pretty common, and that's what I'd really recommend. But if you're for now finding yourself stuck in this category, or you just want to only be working on those heroes, that's fine. Play your Sigma. Do what you can with it. You shouldn't always get stuck with these terrible options, but sometimes you will. Magdalena says, you know what? I still take please no comp over Ryan hard shielding and choke. At very least, they know that sucking infinite spam won't work. That's fair. That's fair. I'm talking about the value of the compositions. I'm not talking about like a specific player driving them. But yes, unfortunately, it is too common to get the Reinhardt in some of the low ranks that sits in the choke, and you go, what am I supposed to do with this? What do I think is the hardest tank to play other than Ball? Well, Ball, but other than Ball, think about my tank roster for a moment here. If I look at my tank roster for a moment here and think about what's the hardest to play other than Ball. Let's use a different color. Without throwing, it's her. Her skill floor to get minimum effective value out of her is higher than a lot of people think, though. Like, you'll see divas in gold, silver, bronze, whatever, who are like, yes, I am playing the hero. No, you're not. No, you're not. You're really not playing the hero until you're using off angles, you're using high ground, you're not frontlining with her. So she's the next hardest hero to play in a reasonably correct manner, I would argue. Then I'd probably get into these two as the next ones. But to answer your question, Diva. Okay. I think that mostly covers it. If you guys have any final questions, throw them up in chat now. If you're enjoying the content, please do drop a like. Consider subscribing if you haven't already done so. If you'd like to see more content like this, I probably won't do a DPS pair one, but I have already done a support pairing tier list like this one in the description below that you could go check out there. Let's give it just another moment to see if you guys have any questions, because I think as the stream has gone on, I've gone a little bit ahead of you guys. But yeah, drop those likes. Consider subscribing if you haven't done so already. And I'll be putting out some more content, not like this. I'll probably end up doing another map guide this week during this Thanksgiving week, as everyone sort of got the holidays, things like that, figuring out what they're doing. Am I going to stream Pokemon? Yes, I will go do some of that on Twitch probably right after this. Maybe I'll take a little break first. But this will be the last Overwatch thing I stream today. I will, however, be doing some streaming over on Twitch, but it will not be Overwatch. Okay, that's going to do it. I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks. Temporal out.